Hey, I'm back again for a third video of the day and continuing on with the Paul McCartney theme and another review where I am reviewing his albums in order of release. So we come to an album that was little paid attention to when it came out and probably been largely forgotten since, even though it was only a few years ago when it came out. Come to October 3rd of 2011. Actually, it was released on the 4th in the United States. And Paul McCartney's Ocean's Kingdom. And so this is another of his classical music albums. This is, depending on how you count it, this is his 5th or his 7th classical release. I guess you could count the Family Way soundtrack and Thrillington to bring it up to 7. And so far, this is his latest in delving into classical music endeavor. So, was a gigantic hit. It flew all the way up to number 144 with a bullet on the U.S. charts. I don't know what it did in England, if anything. He accredited him for being versatile and trying different things. He must enjoy classical music because, like I said, he's done, depending on how you count it, 5 or 7 of these things. So you'd think if he didn't like it that much, he might have done one just to have a little fun and do it, and said, well, that's that, and moved on. But he's done quite a few of these. And of course, the Beatles incorporated classical music elements into a lot of their songs, as did other groups. And so, but this is strictly classical. Actually, it's a ballet in this instance. So yeah, let's just real quick with the cover. There's the front, the back, and it's a double album. There's the gatefold with Paul talking about how he goes about creating music, and then this is a ballet, so it has a story of sorts to it. Double album, like I said, 4 songs, 1 song per side. Actually, 1 movement per side. I'm not sure if you call them songs when you're talking ballet. Good, heavy, thick stock cardboard, so that's a plus. I have 2 copies of this. I have another one that's still sealed, which I should have dug out, but I didn't. But it's the same thing, just with the cellophane wrapper still on it. And the album, one of the albums, the other one's over on the turntable still. So, but they both look the same label-wise. And this is another one of his, I bought 2 of them because I knew that by that time that his albums were on vinyl were going out of print pretty quick in limited editions. So I figured I would buy 2 of them. I don't know. I think this one is out of print. It's still available on Amazon, I believe, but I think it's out of print now. You can get it if you want it for a reasonable price still. It hasn't shot up to those $100 price range prices yet. And so, yeah, whether you want or would like this album all comes down to your take on classical music. You know, if you think classical's something you never pay attention to, or you think it's pretty boring, probably not going to care about this. If you like classical music, you might like this, or you might like one of his other classical excursions. This is the only one of, I do have the Family Way, but other than that and this, these are the only 2 I have. I've heard bits and pieces of Standing Stone and Working Classical and the ECC whatever thing, and I can't remember the other one. Don't remember them, to tell the truth. I would like to have the others on vinyl, but I know that several of them were released that way. I don't know if all of them were, but the ones that were are long out of print, and I've seen them around, and those they're asking crazy $100 plus prices for those. So, being a Beatle nut who has to have everything the Beatles ever did, I'm hoping, not sure there's much chance of it, but maybe he'll re-release the earlier ones at some point, like he's re-released several of his albums. You know, he did do Thrillington with this last round, so it's not totally out of the question that if he re-releases, I don't know, Back to the Egg and Flaming Pie or something, he usually releases those things in groups of 3 or 4. This last round he did New and Wings Greatest and something else and Thrillington, I think it was. So he might tag one of these in with some re-release bouts of some of the other more pop and rock and well-known albums of his. I'd like to have them just to have them, but so yeah, this like I said comes down to if you like classical music or not. Personally, I like it. You know, I've been to the symphony, I've been to the opera, not lately, but I've been. I know a little bit about some of the classical composers, and there's a few pieces of music that if I hear them, I recognize what they are and who they're by. A lot of that stuff I've kind of forgotten because it goes back to just stuff I read way back when or classes that I had in college. But um, sometimes I'll listen to classical music, not very often. Usually on cold winter nights when I'm driving around in my car, sometimes I'll put on the classical station, listen to it for 20 minutes or so, and then I'll say, you know, it's enough of that, and I'll go back to a rock and roll station. But some of it is when I'm listening to it, some of it's kind of sounds the same or boring, and some of it's really pretty nice. So uh, I don't actually have any real classical music albums. I think I've got maybe 2 or 3 in my collection outside of things like this, and I don't listen to those very often. But and also, I'm not qualified to really review classical music or talk about it intelligently because I don't know all that. You know, the arpeggios swell with pregnant expectation and pause, and then the woodwinds unexpectedly switch from A to E flat, which is a risky move. But you know, I don't know music terminology and logistics well enough to talk about anything like that. So all I can really talk about here is whether I like this or not. And generally speaking, I do. So there's a story of sorts here. Some people that live under water in the ocean and people that live on the earth, and they don't get along because the earth people are ruining the ocean. I guess it's sort of a ecology type thing. Bit of a silly story, but then again, when you think about a lot of classical pieces and ballets and operas are sort of based on the story of them is sort of based on kind of a fairy tale, folklore, fantastic, fantasy type storylines. So fair enough. And how well Paul McCartney does classical music compared to, for lack of a better term, real classical musicians that do this for a living, and how it stacks up to that, I don't know. To my ears, it sounds pretty much like classical music, so, but I'm not really qualified to judge, like I say. And, you know, I don't think that Paul is another Beethoven or Bach or Chopin or whatever. I think he's a musical genius on par with those guys, but just in a different medium. Maybe had he fallen in love with classical music back in the 50s instead of Little Richard and Elvis Presley and the Everly Brothers and dedicated himself to making classical music, maybe he would have been really good at it. Who knows? But thankfully he didn't, and we got the Beatles instead. So, I don't know if he plays on any of these albums. I don't think he does on this one. I think he just wrote the score and produced it, and other people play. I think that's probably the case on his other albums of classical music, but I'm not positive. I think he can play brass and woodwind instruments to some degree. Not as adept at them as he is on piano, bass, and guitar, I don't think. But so I don't really know that he's plays on this, and this has no vocals, and I'm not sure if any of his others do or not. I think one of them has a choir on it, but I don't think he's singing in the choir. Maybe he is. I don't know. So, yeah, I have bought this thing in 2011 when it came out, And since then, I have pulled it out and played it maybe 8, 9, 10 times. When I do play it, it's kind of got to be in the mood for it, just like I kind of have to be in the mood for classical music in general. But when I play it, it's enjoyable. I'm not going to rate and rank each song because, like I said, I'm not a music expert in that sort of music. So I would just sound stupid, but just to say that the side 1 and side 3 are very kind of grandiose and majestic and soothing and very pretty and nice to listen to when you're whether you want to sit down and pay attention to it or whether you're just sort of going about your business doing things around the house. Side 2 and 4 are a little more interesting with different things happening in them. More energetic and active, I guess, and sort of dramatic parts to the music here and there. Each side, each song or movement is about 14 minutes, 16 minutes, 13 minutes, and 12 minutes. So pretty long on each track there. And yeah, I do enjoy this when I listen to it. Like I said, it's up to you whether you if you like Paul McCartney and you also like classical music, you might like this, but you might say this doesn't really stack up to true classical music. I don't know. If you're a Beatle fan that has to have every single thing the Beatles ever did, like I am, probably going to want to pick this up. And the other ones too, if you can find them for a decent price. How often you'll listen to them, I don't know. Because like I said, I like it all right, but I probably listened to it only a handful of times since I had it. Played it today just to refresh my memory, and I really enjoyed it before I did this review. It's nice. I'm going to give it a 7. But you know, this isn't rock and roll, this isn't pop, this isn't ballad, this isn't Paul singing or, as far as I know, playing any instruments. It's pretty much pure classical music, and you can kind of see where it could work as a ballet. I think there were actually live performances of this in New York, and if you not the bonus tracks on the album, but if you get the MP3 edition, I think you get bonus tracks of one of the live performances. So, yeah, I mean, a 6 or a 7. I guess I'll go 7. And that's really all there is to say about that, because I'm too dumb to really talk about classical music in any enlightening or intelligent way. So, the cover is supposed to be, I think it's a digital readout of the music that Paul saw, and he thought that it looked like a city, New York City or something, and here you can see the ocean, and so it's the city under the ocean, the people living under the ocean is what that's supposed to represent, I believe. Not sure. Well, I guess that kind of looks like a cityscape too on the back. One thing I thought was pretty funny is if you can see that, I guess Decca probably finally realized the error of their ways and ran out and signed one of the Beatles thinking that they could make a lot of money, but I'm not sure this made a whole lot of money for them. Yeah, it's nice. It's something I play rarely, but when I do, I enjoy it. I'll give it a 7. And so that wraps that one up, and that leaves only 2 McCartney albums to go. Well, I guess 3 in September when the new one comes out, but kind of surprised. I've had fun doing this. I did the Beach Boys, and it took me about 3 years to get through all of them and do reviews, and I went through the McCartney albums pretty quick because I started these, I don't remember, late last year or early this year. So the next 2 McCartney albums I'll get to when I get to, and then the third one when that comes out, and then I'll move on to John or George or Ringo. I haven't really decided yet. And there's some other bands that I'm wanting to do their albums in order of release too. So I might kind of intersperse those so that I'm not just doing one person at a time. But, or I may do John and George because they're be pretty quick to go through those because they don't have the 30 or whatever albums that Paul and Ringo have. So, yeah, if you've if you like classical music and you never bothered with any of the Paul McCartney stuff, this one's not bad. I enjoy it, and I can't really speak to the rest because even though I heard bits and pieces of them years ago, I don't remember them, and I don't have copies of them. But that's it. So have a good rest of the weekend, and maybe I'll do another McCartney review. Probably not tonight, but maybe tomorrow. Yep.